Hello, this is Richard Murphy of Tax Research, and I want to talk about what tax havens are. Now, this is a subject which has caused a lot of controversy over many years because major organisations like the OECD, the IMF and so on have had some considerable difficulty in defining just exactly what they mean by this term, and so has the academic community. Well, it's been exercising me somewhat for the last few weeks, and I thought I'd offer some opinion on where I've got to and suggest a workable definition that could be used for future policy formulation in this area. It seems to me that there are two players in what is generically called the offshore world. The first of those players are the governments who provide the environment in which the offshore world takes place, and the second are those who commercially exploit that environment, and I want to look at them separately. Tax havens are created by governments, no one else. They have to exist somewhere in what I would call a legislative space. Now that means somewhere that has the power to pass law. Now, typically we've understood a tax haven to be a place like a small island. The popular image would have palm trees on it, but in practice it's anywhere where law can be passed that is designed for a particular purpose. And that purpose is designed to relocate economic transactions from the place where they really take place to the place where they're recorded, which is the tax haven. And the inducement offered is one of several things. The first might be low tax rates. That doesn't sound too surprising, but it's by no means the only incentive that these places offer. The second will be secrecy. It may be banking secrecy. In other words, an inquiry may be made of a bank in this place and the information simply cannot be supplied. Or it may be information with regard to who owns a company in that place. Or it may be secrecy with regard to the accounts of a corporation in that place, and so on. But whatever it comes down to, it's secrecy. The third thing that will be provided in this place is a low level of regulation. Not no regulation, because there really are almost no regulated spaces in the world left. Everywhere has some degree of regulation that's necessary to comply with the pressure put upon organisations and countries since 9/11 in particular to comply with money laundering and other rules. So you can't play without regulation anymore. But these governments try to make sure that there's little or no tax, there's little or no regulation, there is secrecy, and finally very limited information exchange. If somebody makes an inquiry of this country, then they make sure it is as hard as possible to provide information to the inquirer as to what is going on inside their space. Now, that's a deliberate move by a government, and the intention of keeping that legislation up to date so it is ahead of the chasing pack who want information of those who operate in tax havens is what defines a tax haven government. So, and for example, one of the things that characterises Jersey, a place with which I'm familiar, as a tax haven is the fact that it has passed a lot of legislation of late to exploit new rules and procedures to make sure that just as the OECD and major countries are catching up with what's going on in Jersey following 9/11 and so on with regard to money laundering, now there are new taxation and trust and company laws to make sure that people can't be found out when they're working there. That's the characteristic of a tax haven government. Now that's the first player. The second one is the commercial pack who follow on from this. Now the commercial pack are quite important because the commercial pack are of course the people who provide the services from the tax haven that earns a return to the government who provides this space. Now, the commercial pack are made up of accountants and lawyers and bankers in particular, but also trust companies and insurance companies and other people like that, most of whom will in fact be associated with one of those first three. So the bankers, the lawyers and the accountants are the most important people to be present because they create the commercial infrastructure which lets people exploit these spaces. And they do or don't go to a tax haven depending upon how stable it is, how far it is from another place, how likely it is to be exploited, and how they believe they can get away with providing their service with or without much regulatory imposition upon them. So, stable places tend to attract tax havens because investors, unsurprisingly, don't want to lose their money. And so they want to know that the money is secure, there are big names there, the governments are stable, and normally therefore they are linked with a major alternative government. That's the precise attraction of the British Crown dependencies and British protectorates. The UK government virtually guarantees that these places are well run as tax havens. and so they attract money. If you're a little island, independent, with no overseeing authority, sitting somewhere in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, as for example Vanuatu is, or Niue, or places like that, you won't attract much money. People will not have the confidence to place it with you. So this is the commercial exploitation of this space. Now, I don't pretend that these two are unrelated. Quite clearly, those who are commercially exploiting tax havens provide a feedback loop into the tax haven governments to suggest the ways in which they can move ahead, to provide the alternative mechanisms that are needed for them to abuse the world taxation system. That happens. But the important point is they are different. The offshore financial centre, which is made up by the commercial pack, operates inside a tax haven, which is created deliberately by a government. A government of any size. It could be the United Kingdom, who deliberately provides certain characteristics of a tax haven, like its domicile rules, refusing to have tax deducted at source and making it quite secretive if you operate a company in the UK. That's a tax haven space provided by the UK. The City of London is the offshore financial centre that seeks to exploit certain parts of that. But this could just as happily be in a small island. But let's come back to the key feature. A tax haven is a legislative space provided by a government who wishes to provide the opportunity for abuse through low tax, low regulation, lack of information exchange and secrecy. An offshore financial centre is the commercial exploitation of that space by accountants, lawyers and bankers, and together they make up the world of offshore. It's complex, but that makes it comprehensible, and that allows for policy initiatives which can tackle the difficulties that this space exposes for the world, because each is separate, distinct, and therefore can be tackled in its own right.